Look, we've all heard the stereotype before. Stoners are lazy, they're unmotivated, they're unproductive, they can't get anything done. But is that actually true? What if I told you that intentionally using cannabis could actually increase your focus and productivity instead of making you feel unmotivated and lazy? In today's video, we're going to unpack the relationship between cannabis, productivity, focus, dopamine, and how you can use that knowledge to level up your own productivity and focus in the way that you get things done. I'm Tabitha Fritz. I'm an intentional cannabis educator, and I'm the founder of Level Up. I help people use cannabis to align their goals for their body, their mind, and their work. This video is kicking off a series of videos on dopamine and focus and productivity and cannabis and ADHD. This is a topic that's on a lot of people's minds nowadays. I know that I see productivity videos all over all the time. Of course, it's because I'm interested in them, and so my algorithm picks them up. But I think that's also, on a lot of people's minds in general, right? We live in a world that's making it increasingly challenging to focus and to be productive and to actually do the things that we want to do. And at the same time, it's becoming even more challenging for many of us to find work, to find something that allows us to make money and feel good about ourselves and what we're contributing to the world at the same time. And not only that, but with all of the distractions and I don't know if you've noticed, but the world's a little bit fucked up right now. It's hard to pay attention to what you're doing sometimes, and it's very easy to feel distracted and unfocused and unmotivated. So if you've ever wondered if cannabis could actually help you focus or be more productive, well, you have come to the right video and you are in the right place, because we're going to start talking about it today in today's video, and the next few videos on this channel are going to be covering this topic as well from a few different angles, so that you can, again, choose the tools that are right for you to live your best, most focused, most productive life, doing the things that you actually want to do. So let's get into it. Okay, so the three main topics in today's video, you guys know I like to do like a 3-point sermon in all my videos. So the three main points in today's video are: number one, what dopamine actually does for your focus and motivation. There's a lot of chatter out in, the social sphere and videos and content and whatever about dopamine and about dopamine hacks and how you can use your dopamine to do this and reset your dopamine and this and that. So we're going to actually look at the science of dopamine and focus and what it actually means, and how dopamine helps you focus and get motivated, and how cannabis can impact that, which is the second point, how cannabis interacts with your dopamine system. So it's one thing to understand the system and understand the chemicals and the molecules that are in your body and how they work. And then, of course, the third point will be how you can use cannabis intentionally to achieve that goal without crashing your motivation, right? And it is about finding the right balance and the product that provides the right amount of dopamine for you, because as you'll see when we get into it, it's very easy to go to one end or the other and to end up with way too much or way too little. So we will talk about how you can use cannabis intentionally as a tool to help you get exactly the right amount of dopamine that you're looking for so that you can get motivated and get shit done. So the first thing that we're going to talk about in this video is how dopamine actually works in your body and in your brain, and how it impacts your ability to focus and how it impacts your motivation. Okay, so dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It is a chemical that is produced by your body, and it interacts with different neurons, or, like the nerve cells in your brain. And the purpose of dopamine is to provide reward and motivation, the potential reward of a positive outcome or something, something that you're looking for. So dopamine as a chemical, it has a couple different functions. First of all, dopamine does provide you with a reward. So when, something amazing happens, let's say you finish a project, right? You've worked on this project for a long time, and maybe it's a paper that you've written for school or something that you've done for work, or, just a project that was of your own volition for your own edification, like a hobby or something that you like doing, or maybe like a YouTube channel, whatever. So when you finish that project, your brain releases a whole bunch of dopamine. It gives you a reward, okay? Your brain goes, oh my God, I feel so good. I'm so happy I did this thing. It makes me feel so good. I want to do it again. I want to do more. I want to keep getting this reward for myself. Okay. So number one, dopamine provides a reward. It makes you feel good when something has happened. But the promise of dopamine has another function, and that function is motivation. So when you are thinking about doing something, when you're starting a project or you're working on a project, the idea of the reward you're going to get at the end of the project, the dopamine that you're going to feel when you're finished, that in and of itself is actually a motivator. There's small amounts of dopamine that are expressed into your brain during that motivation process, and that's what gets you the motivation to get started. So when your dopamine levels in your brain are low, you're more focused on how tired you feel and how hard it is to get stuff done and how you don't really feel like doing this thing, and you're unproductive and you're unmotivated and you don't really want to do it. And it's easy to be distracted, and it's easy to think about something else and not focus on the thing that's hard. But with a little bit of dopamine, it actually increases the motivation in your brain. And suddenly, instead of focusing on how tired you are or how distracted you are, your brain starts focusing on the possibility of reward that it's going to receive on the other end of doing this thing. Dopamine gives your brain a little boost of what it's going to feel like when it gets its full dopamine reward. So you get this little bit of dopamine that's expressed. Your brain goes, oh yeah, I like that. I like that feeling. I know that that's the feeling that I want. So let's go. It's important to understand that lower dopamine levels in your brain are often going to make it harder to focus, to get started, to get motivated, whereas a higher dopamine level makes you very motivated to do things, right? And as you'll see, you can become too motivated to do things if your dopamine levels are too high. So it's important to understand that there is a link between dopamine and focus, dopamine and motivation, dopamine and the ability to get things done, but it is a delicate balance. So when dopamine levels are too low, it's very challenging to focus and be productive and be motivated. When dopamine levels are just right, the Goldilocks level, now we can get stuff done because we're feeling motivated. We're thinking about the reward that's going to be at the end of that. But if your dopamine levels get too high and you have too much dopamine, too much motivation to do stuff, now you start to see more risk-taking behavior. We see things like compulsive gambling, overeating, shopping, other kinds of risky behavior because the person has so much dopamine in their brain that they're motivated to do all kinds of things that don't even make sense for their life, that aren't the best thing for them to do in a long-term perspective, right? But because they have so much dopamine in the moment, their brain's like, do it, do it, do it. Motivated, motivated, motivated. Go, go, spend that money, eat that cake, pull that slot arm, whatever, right? When you have a dopamine regulation problem, you often end up with an impulsivity problem. So, you get motivated on opposite ends of the spectrum. Too little dopamine, you're not motivated to do anything. Too much dopamine, and I'm going to do it all, and it's not going to be great. Okay? So that's the relationship between dopamine and focus, and dopamine and motivation. When we think about how cannabis affects dopamine, we're introducing a new variable into the equation. And this is where it gets really interesting. And that is because cannabis, and specifically the cannabinoid THC, has a dose-dependent effect on dopamine. And what I mean by that is that the dose of cannabis that you take impacts the amount of dopamine that is then expressed in your brain as a result. Okay? THC can be a highly motivating cannabinoid because it does help to express dopamine in your brain, helping you get motivated, helping you feel like you're more productive, giving you a little taste of the reward at the end. But it can be very easy with too much THC to now have more dopamine than you need to get things done, and now you're not going to get anything done. Now, I talked before about the immediate effect. So if you have a lot of dopamine in your system, you're going to become very motivated to do things, even if they're risky behaviors. Now, that is an immediate effect. Now, when we look at THC, we want to think about the dopamine system in your brain over time. Because even if we are taking too much THC and expressing too much dopamine, and maybe we're feeling really motivated in the very first moment that happens, over time, that leads to dysregulation in your dopamine system. And it actually, over time, will decrease the dopamine production in your brain. So it will blunt your dopamine production. You will have less dopamine in your body overall making it more challenging to feel the reward, to get motivated, to focus, if you are consuming levels of THC that are too high for your system over a long period of time. Let me just rephrase that and say that a little bit differently again. So when you're consuming THC, low levels of THC, and I'm not saying don't get high, because, I'm not going to villainize getting high. It's a totally acceptable application of intentional cannabis use. But when you are choosing to consume for focus or productivity, being high is not usually the best way to be focused and be productive, right? So you want to think about the amount of THC that you're consuming ahead of time so that you don't consume levels that are so high that now you're unfocused and unmotivated, and you're off in the Skilfriggan's mill pond somewhere else. So it's really about, again, intentional cannabis consumption. It always comes down to this, finding the right products and the right dose for you to achieve the outcome that you're looking for, right? Today, obviously, we're talking about dopamine and how THC specifically can affect dopamine levels in your brain. So lower amounts of THC will increase the acute levels of dopamine in your brain. This means that if you are looking to get a little bit of motivation and focus, a small amount of THC can absolutely help, because it temporarily increases the dopamine levels in your brain to such an extent that you are now remembering the reward on the other end of your work. You are feeling motivated. You are feeling productive and ready to go. Okay. But if you have consumed too much THC, you're going to lose focus. It's going to be very hard to stay focused and motivated in the moment. And you're going to be affecting your dopamine system over time, making it dysregulated and likely to produce less dopamine than it would have anyways over time, because you are using too much THC and it's not what your system needs. Okay. You're every time you use THC, you express some dopamine. It's part of what makes you feel good when you immediately consume cannabis. Go outside, have a little puff. The effects don't come on for about 5 minutes, but you almost immediately start to feel good when you inhale a bit of cannabis. It's because your brain's releasing dopamine. Your brain goes, oh, I know we're going to feel better when this is over. We're going to feel better once this starts kicking in. Okay, let's go. Get that dopamine out. Make her feel good. Make her know that she made a good choice and did the right thing. If I'm going to consume cannabis for focus and attention, I will usually take my one hitter outside, because it allows me to have one hit, stop, think about, okay, am I ready to go? Nope. Okay, let me take one more. And then I'm titrating one hit at a time until I get exactly what I need, checking in with myself after each little bit of consumption. Is that what I wanted? Do I need more? Is that good? Because every day is different, right? I need to listen to my body to understand what it is that I need in the moment to be my best. A lot of this is listening in, right? Going slow so that you can hear your body saying, that's enough, or I need a little bit more. We have to listen. We have to slow down. We have to focus. Ironic, telling you to focus. Video about focus. I know. Well, I'll just mention dosing very briefly, because, everyone's dose is going to be different. Obviously, everyone consumes a different amount of cannabis. I would recommend that you start, if you're going to use cannabis for focus and productivity, start with something that's a bit of a microdose for you if you want to take an edible. So whatever that looks like for you. For a lot of people, that's 1 to 2 milligrams. For other people, that's 5 milligrams. Some people, that could be 20 milligrams. The definition of a microdose is that it is sub-perceptual. So you do not feel high, you do not feel altered, but it does in fact impact you and affects your ability to do things, to in this case, be more focused and motivated. So in this case, we would want to have a small amount so that we could really check in with ourselves and see if it's working and see if we liked the product and the dosage. Now, it's going to be a lot easier to titrate with an inhaled product than with an edible product, because the effects are going to come on much more quickly, right? If you take a gummy for focus, now you're going to have to wait at least 30 minutes, potentially up to like 3 hours for some people. But you're going to have to wait a lot longer to see what the effects of that edible are going to be. And you're also going to have to wait a lot longer to see if you're actually able to focus. Like if it worked, now it's not going to work for, 30 minutes to 2 hours. Now you got to wait that long to get your focus in, which again, if it's intentional cannabis consumption and you've thought about it and you know, like, I have this thing coming up in 2 hours, I know that's how long this edible is going to take to kick in, I know exactly the dosage that I need to focus, then yes, go for it, do it. But in the beginning, when you're figuring out the kind of dosage that you need for this purpose, I would recommend that you start with an inhaled method, either smoking or vaping, because the onset is so quick. All right, that will give you, I think, a better idea quickly about how much you need and how it's going to affect your dosage. And also the effects won't last as long. So if you do overconsume and you find yourself unmotivated, unfocused, unable to work, then, with an edible, you're going to have to wait several hours for the effects of that edible to wear off. And now you've potentially lost a whole day that you were going to work on something or do something. Whereas if it's, an inhaled experience and you've consumed too much, then it's probably, you're going to feel, a lot less high within an hour. Just grab a cup of coffee if you're feeling a bit burnt out, and then you can maybe focus and get some stuff done. Your day's not a total wash in that way, right? So experimenting, I would say try an inhaled more than an edible when you're first figuring out your dosage and how it's going to work for you. Like I said, the third point in my sermon today is how to use cannabis intentionally in a way that supports your using cannabis for focus and for dopamine production. So a lot of these things, I already mentioned. If you're using cannabis to zone out or to escape, you're probably not improving the quality of your dopamine levels or the quality of the dopamine in your body at this point, right? Of course, cannabis is a great tool for escape. It absolutely allows us to zone out and to not deal with our stresses and to just forget about it. And not that there's anything wrong with that sometimes, right? Like, if you're feeling really stressed out, there's nothing wrong with putting it all down for a few hours and just relaxing before you pick it back up and deal with it again. But if you're consistently using cannabis to drown out your troubles or forget that, you have things that you need to get done, or you're really using it to cope, it's not going to help you long term. You're actually going to end up with more problems, most likely long term, than you would if you weren't using cannabis in that way. But again, if you're using it intentionally to engage, to problem solve, to be more creative, to help you focus before work, a big use of cannabis for focus is for folks with ADHD. And I'm going to do a whole video on cannabis and ADHD as part of this series. So if you have ADHD or you know people with ADHD, stick around and make sure that you watch that video, because we will talk more specifically about dopamine levels, which are, they have a huge impact on folks with ADHD. And they're a big part of the reason that people with this particular flavor of neurodivergence have more challenge than others in getting things done. So we will be focusing on ADHD and dopamine and cannabis use in a later video. So there are absolutely, of course, ways to use cannabis intentionally to get more things done. It's the opposite of that lazy stoner stereotype that we mentioned in the very beginning. Cannabis can actually be very, very useful when you have a clear reason for using it, when you are in a conscious setting, when you've chosen a setting and you've gotten your mindset in the right place, the setting that works for you, and you engage in reflection afterwards, whether that's through keeping a journal and saying, like, this was my intention, this is what I consumed, this is how I felt afterwards, or even just reflecting later on and saying, okay, how did that go? Did that work for me? Did I feel good? Did it help me accomplish the thing I was trying to do? Should I try something different? A big part of growth and learning, like as a human, is self-reflection and is taking a look at if things worked or didn't, and if we want to change things. So of course, that's got to be a big part of intentional cannabis consumption as well. But on the other hand, if your consumption is more reactive, you're feeling burnt out a lot, it's very habitual, you just come home and light up a joint, like it's not about, intentionally taking a moment to breathe and rest and relax. It's just, I just smoke all the time. I'm just, I used to have some friends who, I swear to God, they would smoke like 4 blunts a day, like 4 1-gram blunts a day. And I was like, what are you doing? And they were like, I don't know. Right. But like, you get to that in your life sometimes. You're not paying attention, and all of a sudden you're just consuming huge amounts of cannabis. And at that point you have to, you got to check in with yourself and be like, okay, I think something needs to change here. Like, this isn't working. Right. Anyways, that's a little bit of an aside. But if you find that your cannabis consumption is very habitual, if you find that you're becoming emotionally avoidant because of your consumption, like you're consuming so that you don't have to deal with your emotions, especially, you could say other people's, but really dealing with your own emotions. If you're avoiding dealing with your own emotions and you're using cannabis as a tool to help you do that, that's a sign that your use is maybe not the healthiest, right? And you should probably examine it. If you find it to be overstimulating, right? If you are getting too high or it's too much and you're not feeling good because of it, that's another sign that you should perhaps take a look at your consumption and make sure that it's where it should be. And if you find yourself in a dopamine draining situation, you find that you are lacking motivation to get things done all the time, you find that you're lacking focus, you find that you can't sit down and get your work done, you're unproductive, you're unmotivated, then it's probably time to examine your cannabis consumption as well, especially if you haven't been using cannabis intentionally and you've just been using it reactively to escape from your life. It can lead to all of these negative effects, including, down regulation of dopamine, where your dopamine is not as effective as it once was for your brain. And so in that case, you got to do something different, or you're going to have a lot of trouble with focus and motivation in general. So if you want to try, I mentioned some of these steps before, but let me just give you a framework. So if you want to try using cannabis intentionally for focus or productivity or getting motivated, here is a way that you can approach it. So I mentioned this first, microdose first. So if you're taking an edible and you have no idea what a microdose looks like for you, start around 1 to 2 milligrams. Okay, because that's going to give you a dose that's most likely low enough that it'll be, if not subperceptual, it'll be close to subperceptual. So you won't feel overwhelmed, you won't feel too high, and then you can always go up from there. But like I said, I would definitely recommend an inhaled product, or even, if you're going to do an edible, get something that's nano infused, because it's going to come on a lot more quickly. The onset time will be a lot shorter, which is what you want so that you can figure out what dosage and what products are working for you. You don't want to have to take a long time to figure it out. So you choose something with a shorter onset time and a shorter duration if possible. So an inhaled product would be good for that as well. With a microdose, if you already know what your microdose is, go with that, right? Don't listen to my 1 to 2 milligrams if you already know what works for you. I know what a microdose is for me. I wouldn't take 1 to 2 milligrams. I would take a whole lot more in order for me to get a sub-perceptual effect, but still have some effects, right? If I took 1 to 2 milligrams, it would do nothing. So there would be no point in me doing that. And so if you know the right microdose for you, consume that. Now, in terms of your THC to CBD ratio, probably going to want to look for something that's a little bit more balanced. It has more CBD in it, which will sort of mitigate some of the effects of the THC, prevent you from getting too high. But again, this is really about personal consumption choices and what works with your own personal biology. Everyone's personal biology is different from day to day and from moment to moment. So what works for you one day might be a little different from what works for you another day. So if you're just figuring it out, I definitely would recommend that you start with a more balanced product, something that's closer to a 1-to-1 CBD to THC ratio, just because it's going to be easier to find the sweet spot for you. But once you get into it, once you've been using cannabis for focus and productivity for a while, you might find that you need something a little bit stronger. So then just up your THC percentage. Right? You can keep your CBD in there if you want to. Just take your THC up a little bit as you go. Higher percentage, you start with a 14% THC and then work your way up. And then eventually you're at a 20% THC. And then you might go up to a 22% THC and go, whoa, that was too high. That was not what I wanted. That was not the experience that I was looking for. So when you do that a little bit by a little bit, you don't jump from a 15, to a 29% THC product. You're able to do those little baby steps along the way that help you say, yes, this is working. No, this is not working. This is too much. This is not enough, right? So go slow, start low, go slow. I know I say it all the time, but it's so true. That's what you want to do to avoid having an overwhelming and uncomfortable experience. And then you can also think about terpenes. So terpenes are a topic that we're going to do a video on in this series. I'm going to do a specific video on the dopamine boosting terpenes that occur not only in the cannabis plant, but in nature, right? You can choose foods that are rich in these terpenes. You could choose essential oils rich in these terpenes. So there absolutely are terpenes that help to improve focus and memory and motivation. And then we also want to think about timing. So when are you going to consume the product before you are going to sit down and focus or work or whatever it is that you're working on getting done? So if it's an edible, we talked about this a little bit earlier, the timing can be quite challenging. So it can go anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the person and their metabolism and what they've eaten, etc. So it's more challenging to figure out the timing with an edible, unless you're very familiar with the effects of that specific edible and you know exactly how it's going to affect you. Then obviously it's easy and you can do it. That's why I recommend, however, an inhaled method, at least in the beginning, because the effects are so fast. So you can figure out what works for you and do it. The fourth tip is to track your responses. Again, right? Like, keep track. Why did I consume this product? What did I consume? What was the product? What was the dosage? What were the terpenes in it? What was the cannabinoid amount? What were the cannabinoid ratios, etc.? And how you felt afterwards. Did it work? Were you able to focus? Here's something you can do is, if you're using this for focus specifically, write down at the beginning, before I consume the product, on a scale of 1 to 10, my focus or my motivation or my productivity was at what number? It was, let's say maybe it was at a 3. And so then I'm writing down, I'm going to consume, this, I don't know, Blue Dream. I'm going to put it in my one hitter. I had 3 hits of it. And now, I'm going to go back to work. I get my work done, blah, blah, blah. I set a little reminder on my phone. And an hour later, it comes up and I go, oh yeah, here's how I'm feeling now. Let me write that in. Am I more focused? Am I more motivated? Am I getting things done? Was it easier to get started? And if it was, then you found something that works for you. And if it wasn't, then you haven't found something that works for you, and you try something else. You try a different dosage, you try a different product, you try different timing, whatever. But unless you're keeping track of the things that you take and how you're feeling before and after you take them, you're not going to have any kind of idea about whether or not they worked. So, you can do this just in a little notebook. You can have a piece of paper. You can do it on your phone. You can do it in a note on your phone. You can, if you're a nerd like me, you can make a Notion template out of it. And I also, if you want, I have a free download PDF paper that you can use and keep track of everything right there. It's all printed out for you. You just print it out in your printer. You can print as many copies as you want, whatever size you want. You can print 4 of them on a page if you want to. And then you can keep track of your consumption and what's working for you, right? Because if you don't keep track, you're never going to know. You have to have like some kind of record to look at to go, oh, did that work or didn't work, right? So some method, some way of keeping track. It's in the description. It's free. If you don't have anything else and you don't know how to keep track, and maybe you're not an organized person, go get it. It's free. Just use it. It's such a good tool. Regardless of what you choose to write your consumption down with, I do want you to try this little 3-day experiment. So if you decide to use, cannabis for focus and productivity, I have a little experiment that I want you to use. I'd love for you to try this. And then let me know in the comments how it goes. Or if you don't want to let me know in the comments, send me an email. Go to levelupbud.com and use the contact form, but I will get all your emails. Tell me how this works for you. I'm really interested. So here's the 3-day experiment that I want you to try. Number 1, every day you're going to pick some focus related task. Okay. So, maybe you have work to do for your work, or maybe you're working on your social media channel, or you are working on your side hustle, or, whatever it is. There could be all kinds of different things that you need to focus on. So every day I want you to pick one task that you need to focus on. And then before the task, microdose with intention. That means you're setting an intention. I'm consuming this product to be more focused and motivated with this task. Do the thing, write it down, keep track of the intention, keep track of the dosage in the product, and then write down how you felt afterward. Were you more focused? Were you more creative? Were you more motivated? Whatever it was you were looking to do. Did you achieve that effect? Did the cannabis help or did it hurt? Now, do this for 3 days, because 3 days is when you can start to maybe see a little bit of a pattern, especially if you're using the same product. If you're using the same product for 3 days and you have 3 of same outcomes, then that gives you a pretty good indication of how that product's going to interact with your body. If you use the same product for 3 days in a row, though, and you get 3 different outcomes, that's very interesting. And you're going to want to investigate more into why your personal biology or your set and setting in those moments had such a variable impact. Because if the product was the same, it's got the same cannabinoids in it, the same terpenes, the same ratios, the same consumption method, that means that you are different. And your set and setting or your personal biology, which are 2 of the factors in a cannabis experience, must have changed and are having a big impact on your ability to focus and be motivated and get things done. That's very interesting. But if you never kept track of those things, you would never be able to identify that that's what's going on here. Cannabis is affecting those things some way. Cannabis is not the thing that's creating the outcome here, but it is affecting something else systemically. So let's see what's going on. Let's do some more investigating. Let's learn some more things. Let's listen more to ourselves so we can find the truth. Okay, so I would love for you to try that experiment and let me know how it goes. Let me know if you find something interesting, if you find some interesting patterns, if you find products that work, if you find products that absolutely did not work. I would love to know all of those things because everyone's experience with cannabis is unique. And I would love to hear about yours. I would love to collect your unique data points so that I can understand more about different people's experiences. So please, if you decide to do the experiment, share it with me and let me know how it goes for you. All right, if the content today resonated with you, I've made a free intentional cannabis consumption guide for focus. It's a free downloadable PDF. It's in the description, and I'll put it in the description of all of these videos on cannabis and dopamine and focus because I think it's a really, really good tool. It's quite comprehensive. So if you download and look at it, you're going to get, a real significant preview of the other videos that are coming in this series. There are tips in there. There are tools in there. There are all kinds of really good stuff for folks who want to use cannabis to improve their focus and be more motivated and more productive. So if that is of interest to you, please go to the description and grab it. It's totally free. You give me your email address. I promise not to spam you, and you can unsubscribe from me anytime if I bore you or bother you. And if, like I said, if you're interested in going even deeper on this topic, cannabis and focus and productivity and motivation, stick around because the next several videos on this channel are going to be focused on that topic. We're going to be diving deep. As ChatGPT says, we're going to do a dive deep into these topics and learn more about, terpenes and food and social media and ADHD and all of the things. So in closing, I would just like to remind you that your dopamine system does not need to be hacked. It needs to be respected. And cannabis, when it's used intentionally as a tool for this purpose, can provide powerful clarity and really help you get shit done. So stick around and we will knock off all the items on your to-do list together. All right. I will see you guys in the next one.